The Middle Fork of the Salmon River in central Idaho is one of the earliest designated wild and scenic rivers in the United States, and is considered the crown jewel of the system. The Salmon River flows for 425 miles and is in the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness area that has a steep canyon with 7,000 feet of vertical drop, making it actually deeper than the Grand Canyon. And don't worry about why it's called the No Return wilderness area. I'll explain why a little bit later. Last summer, I joined a dozen other ladies, soon to become friends, on a week-long rafting and boating trip down this remote, untouched, absolutely stunning wilderness area where there is no electricity, no cell phones, not even a road or a building for more than 2 million acres. And you always get a choice. Do you feel like paddling and rafting, or do you want to go on the dory boat and just sit back and relax and enjoy the scenery? And we're not just rafting all day. We get out and we hike a lot as well. It is so much fun. We had 4 outstanding female river guides, and then we had 2 swampers. These are the guys who are taking our food and our gear on another boat down ahead of us to take care of everything, so it was all set up and nice for us. So yes, we were camping, but I'm not quite sure I'd say we were roughing it. That's it. So us, the pines, the canyons, and the eagles, and of course, the river. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kim Parks. Today, we're going to be whitewater rafting one of the prettiest rivers in the country, and we're going to have the whole river virtually to ourselves. In fact, to keep things pristine, only 7 commercial permits are given daily, with only a max of 30 people in the rafts allowed. That's it. That's the most people you'd see all day. And most of the times, we didn't see them. If you want to get away from it all and get back to nature, this is your trip. So today I'm going to share with you my incredible rafting vacation with a company called Adventure Women, who, as you can imagine, builds trips exclusively for women. For the men and couples out there, I've got options for you too in the show notes. So let's get started rafting the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. I've had friends who've traveled with Adventure Women before, but I've not had the pleasure of taking one of their tours myself. But I'd gotten it into my head that I wanted to raft the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, and since I had to head west anyway for a conference late last summer, I looked for a guided trip with dates near my conference. And kismet, Adventure Women had a trip right before my conference. So I quickly booked the trip before it sold out. The adventure starts in Boise, Idaho. And since I'd never been there before, in fact, I'd only been on the west side of the Tetons in Idaho before, I decided to spend a few days exploring the city, and I'm sure glad that I did. I absolutely fell in love with Boise, and I made several new friends while there. If it weren't for the fact that they have to sometimes deal with wildfire smoke in the summer times, I'd consider even retiring there. That's how much I liked it. I don't think my lungs have ever fully recovered from a horrible case of bronchitis I developed on a trip to Haiti. And in fact, you'll hear more about that on my episode about Egypt coming up a little bit later this spring. So anyway, the chance of wildfire smoke, that unfortunately eliminates Boise as a potential retirement area. So let's get back to rafting. As far as rafting goes, I've been fortunate enough to raft 2 of the prettiest rivers in the world. The Tully in Australia, which you can hear about on episode 4, and the Pequari River in Costa Rica, episode 15. Of course, I'll put links in the show notes for you. So in the past, all I'd done was day rafting. And I was a little bit anxious to see, how am I going to do if I'm going to be out in the water for a whole week? That seems like a long time. And I was anxious to find out. I remember Mike, our guest from episode number 9, talking about his 17-day rafting trip through the Grand Canyon. And he called that a test of endurance. So I was like, am I up for this? Can I do this? My trip wouldn't be nearly that long, but it was something I definitely had to consider before booking. But it turns out the week flew by, and it ended up being a non-issue for me, and as far as I can tell, all the rest of the gals as well. There was just so much beauty to drink in. We were constantly surrounded by awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping scenery that just made you feel small. It was just incredible. We met as a group at the airport hotel. After breakfast, we took a bus along the Payette River and stopped for lunch at Horseshoe Bend. The sides of the river are covered in upright Scotch pines that are contrast with the jagged rock edges of the shore. And you can tell that it's glacial water by the fabulous blue color from that glacial silt that reflects back when the sun hits it. It gets that otherworldly bluish, sometimes tealish color. Stunning. And you can see that there's lots of cabins and campgrounds along the river indicating this is a pretty popular place for recreation. The soil in the area is made up of decomposed granite, so it drains like a septic tank. And because these high desert mountains are prone to wildfires, whenever there is a fire, it takes what seems like forever for the vegetation to come back, especially on the sunnier south side. We saw an area that had burned in the 80s, and there still is no new growth there. However, if you look on the north sides of the mountains, where it's cooler and the water often pools by the bottom, you can see that vegetation slowly working its way back up the hill. It was really fascinating to see nature rejuvenate so clearly. On average out here, about 200,000 acres burn each year due to wildfires. They learned to deal with wildfires the way I have to deal with hurricanes. The Salmon River is considered one of the best catch-and-release fly fisheries in the nation. It produces 45% of the rainbow trout and has about 70% of the remaining habitat for salmon and steelhead in the Columbia River Basin. The Salmon River is the largest undammed river in the lower 48. Obviously, this is a huge and important area for salmon. In their early years, the salmon live in the river. A female is going to lay about 5,000 eggs in the gravel river bed, and the male will fertilize the eggs by releasing smelt. Then he dies. The female will soon die as well, but tries to protect the nest as best she can until she does. I learned from a ranger before we headed out that the salmon returning and then dying in the rivers is an important way for nutrients to enter this ecosystem of this high desert environment that's really rather barren of nutrients. This whole cycle of nature just fascinates me. So back to the salmon. Once the juveniles become an adult, they then head out to the ocean to live out their adult lives of roughly about 3 years. Their main job is to get fat. I like that job. When they are fully fat and mature, they return with uncanny precision to the river of their birth in order to spawn. For those of the Salmon River, this means 800 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean. And they're not eating, mind you, and they're gaining 6,000 feet elevation gain. 6,000 feet they're climbing. What a remarkable accomplishment. When they arrive, they look like crap. They are all beaten up. And it's a wonder that they can even mate. Damming of the rivers has caused huge problems for them as they try to accomplish this heroic journey, even when the dams are offering salmon ladders for them to climb. They have to cross 8 dams between the spawning grounds and the Pacific. Happily, the Salmon River is undammed, making it especially important for these fish. This rafting trip is my first official women-only trip, and I soon learned that there's a very different dynamic when it's all women. On many trips, couples tend to pair off a lot, and while they're sociable with the rest of the group, they tend to sit and stay together. But with this group of super supportive women, we mix and match throughout our journey together. I love this. At the end of our first day, we end up in the small town of Stanley, which is the takeoff point for our adventure. But first we have a welcome dinner at the Mountain Village Resort, where we all enjoyed an excellent meal. Afterwards, outside, I watched one of the owners and a couple other musicians get up and play. They have a really nice festive patio, and so I just listened to the music for a little bit before turning in to try to get a good night's rest before our big adventure. After breakfast the next day, we head to a small airstrip where we wait for the plane to arrive to take us to our put-in point. When it arrives, out pops Crocodile Dundee, our pilot. Because the summer is almost over, this is late August, the river isn't high enough for us to put in further north like we ordinarily would. And since there are no roads near our new put-in, Crocodile Dundee flies us there. Our new put-in is Indian Creek, and what a gorgeous bird's eye view we got on our way there. I get a kick out of our special treat of being flown to our put-in point. I think apparently early in the season when the water levels are higher, you can drive to the Boundary Creek put-in. After an informative leave no trace and general presentation by a forest ranger, we finally head to the river. I learned that we are in the largest contiguous federally managed wilderness in the lower 48. We also hear what kind of wildlife we might see while on the river. Fish, of course, but possibly osprey and bald eagles, Vernon's woodpeckers, bighorn sheep, although generally the groups are of the females as they kick out the males. Rarely but possible are sightings of black bears, wolverines, and mountain lions. We learn that elk, mule deer, and the moose prefer the standing water over rivers, so we're unlikely to see them. Like I mentioned earlier, on the water you get a choice. You can either paddle in a raft that holds about 6 people, plus the guide, or you could take the large raft that is paddled solely by the expert guide. Our 4 river guides soon give us the confidence that they know this river and they know what they're doing. I feel like I'm in good hands. The river is quite lively, as every few hundred yards another stream empties into it, adding yet more water. In the spring with snowmelt, the Class 3 and Class 4 rapids we're going to be going through can easily top Class 4 and Class 5. I find the rapids exciting but not scary. You can ask the guides each day if you're on the twitchy side about rapids whether you should go on the dory or paddle in the raft, depending on your comfort zone. On this first day, some were lucky enough to see a mama bear and her cub. Plus we saw osprey and eagles. Around 4 o'clock we put in for the night. The 2 men, Ryan and John, paddled the supply raft ahead of us each day. They're called swampers, and they've already set up camp for us, and they are also our main cooks. Sweet. We have a large dry bag with our stuff. It includes a nice sleeping bag and pad, a pillow, plus our own duffel with our clothes and toiletries. The tour included all the camping gear, so unless I wanted to bring my own, I didn't have to. The 2-person tents are a nice size with room to move about. Our dry bags are stamped with a name on it so we know whose is whose. Mine is labeled Elk Bat. It's a typo. It's supposed to be Elk Bar, but since the screw-up, all the river guides refer to the area known as Elk Bar as Elk Bat. Because I chose not to pay the dreaded single supplement, I get paired with a roommate. And the roommate changes daily so that every once in a while we don't have to share with anyone because we have an odd number of solo travelers. I like this deal. And I like that I'm given the option to save a little money by having a roommate even though I couldn't bring my own roommate. I really dislike single supplements, and I'm going to be doing a show on the Adventure Travel Show podcast soon about them. That was a request I got from listener Shar. Thanks, Shar. Which is a reminder, if you have show ideas for either this show or the Adventure Travel Show podcast, send me an email, kit@activetraveladventures.com. I love getting your emails regardless, and I love getting show ideas as well. Our first night, and actually all subsequent nights, we are treated to hors d'oeuvres and wine or beer. This is luxury camping. I hadn't expected this. Dinner was even better, with our choice of salmon cooked 5 different ways. I chose the spicy sriracha huckleberry sauce, which was an excellent choice. And that paired nicely with the broccoli and our feta spinach salad, followed by blueberry crumble. I have a feeling I'm going to like this trip. After dinner, we go around the group asking where everybody's been and where they want to go to next. This is a really well-traveled group with some really exciting stories to tell. I'm excited to get to know them. Our average age is in the mid-60s, mostly retired, although Adventure Women tells me that their average client is around 55. One gal is in her 70s, and she has been on countless Adventure Women trips. And she's fit enough to give us all a run for our money. I learned that they do things differently here in the high desert than how I've learned to do them in the East Coast mountains near where I live. I've been trained, and I teach others sanitation habits that they reverse out west in this arid desert area. The reason is because of the rainfall. Where I live, we easily get over 40 inches of rain each year, usually more. Here, though, they're lucky to get 7 inches. So while the rule of thumb where I live is to go to the bathroom at least 200 feet from a water source, here their rule is, if you or a bug would eat it, it goes in the water. So they have a different protocol for pee and toothpaste. Where I live, the rain would flush our urine through the soil, thus cleaning it before it enters the waterways. Here it does not, so we have to toss our pee in the river. Ditto our toothpaste after we brush. Where I camp in the Appalachian Mountains, I spit in the fire pit, not in the woods, not in the river. And for solid waste, I'm used to digging a cat hole 200 feet from the water and packing out my toilet paper. Here we use something called a groover. What's a groover? Okay, picture a tall, skinny tent for privacy. All right, and then inside this tent, basically the equivalent of a 5-gallon bucket fitted with a toilet seat. Your number 2 goes in there, and once it's full, the lid is screwed on, and we pack it out. You pee in a 5-gallon bucket, also with the seat, and toss and rinse that in the water after you use it. The groover got its name as before somebody got the bright idea to rig the bucket with a toilet seat, you'd get those round indented grooves on your butt from sitting on the bucket. Funny, no? They've also rigged up a portable water system. There's a foot pump taking water from one 5-gallon bucket through a hose, and then we also have a rinse bucket where, again, we're also collecting that water as well. Very clever. I'm actually going to rig up the same kind of thing for car camping. After a good night's sleep, we're all raring to go for a full day on the water. Breakfast was tasty, as was the coffee. We tear down, and the swampers pack up, and off we go. The river is exciting with multiple fun rapids to tackle. I'm loving this, the scenery, and the women. Our guides are great too. We have Maddie, who is in love and hopes to be engaged soon. Update, she got engaged shortly after our trip. And I believe Addie's mom was a river guide herself on this very river. We also have Kayla with a C, Anna, and Ashley. All are very confident, strong women who don't look big enough to take on the river, but they do so with aplomb. One nice thing is that we're not just sitting in the raft all day. Every couple hours, we get out not just for a pit stop with Groover, but also to take a hike or see something cool. When we were taking a short but steep hike up to see some petroglyphs, we learned that it's best to stomp so that we let any reptiles like snakes and lizards know that we're coming. They're going to feel rather than hear you, so they can get out of the way. That is very useful information. On our first day, we have a delicious lunch of tuna croissant underneath the pines. Heaven. We see a group of bighorn sheep along the bank that afternoon, and they look nonplussed as we float on by. Cute, cute, cute. One thing I wish I had packed was some cotton garden gloves. Not necessarily for paddling so much as to keep the sun off my hands. I wear long hiking pants and a long-sleeve hiking shirt, plus a wide-brimmed hat to keep off the sun, but I'm more fanatical than most about keeping the sun off since I'm so fair. Sun lovers could easily do this trip in their bathing suits and shorts. The temperature is very pleasant. At another rest break, we hike up Loon Creek to a hot spring. Maddie generously offers to wash our hair. What luxury! Hot water for rinsing. I learned that the glue in Chaka's water sandals can hold up to the heat in this particular hot springs, but the Keens do not. And of course, I brought my new Keens just for rafting, and this is their first use. But they started unraveling on both sandals in the same place, and I'm not happy about this, and I'm hoping that they're going to hold up for the trip. There's no resupply store for 50 square miles in this wilderness. The water sandals are very comfortable and cute, but with the defect and my new knowledge about the inferior glue, I'm going to switch brands when I get home. Back on the water a little bit later, one of the rafts gets stuck on a rock. When this happens, the guide can usually maneuver a bit to dislodge the boat or raft, but this late in the season, the water level is low, and Anna tosses that bag with a rope like an ace pitcher, and she's able to pull them off the rock. There is a rare bit of audience there to witness her athletic prowess. And there's also a fabulous kayaker who had great fun watching tackle the rapids from above. He was so skilled and made it look easy going over some of the small falls. The guides are not just greatly skilled, they're also knowledgeable about the history and the geology of the area. I learned that the nomadic Native American people of the Salmon River and Sawtooth Mountains are called Tukadihas, and they're also called the mountain sheep eaters due to the abundance of wild sheep in the area that was a main source of their protein. Back on that same Loon Creek where Maddie washed my hair, 5 Chinese immigrants who were there in the 1860s during a gold rush were murdered and the sheep eaters were blamed. This started the Sheep Eaters' War, and 51 Tukadihas were captured and relocated to a reservation, and for the most part, their life here in the canyon was over. The Chinese had moved to the area due to a terrible famine they had escaped from in China. They were great vegetable farmers, and they grew the food for those seeking their fortune in the gold rush. You'll still see some errant daisies that escaped cultivation, remnants of the Chinese immigrants. The Salmon River itself is about 2 million years old, but it's a dynamic river, and it changes daily, so the guides have to always be on alert. A large tree fell in the river yesterday, which causes an obstacle for us to avoid. And while I'm thinking of it, I'd recommend that you listen to the Adventure Travel Show podcast episode number 15 on why a tree in a river is so dangerous, as well as learning how to safely cross a river. I'll put a link in the show notes. The terraced benches were formed by different glacial period. Some of the rapids are formed by constructions, other by destructions like rock restrictions or gradients. The rapids formed in different periods over time. And most rapids are a combination of construction and destruction as they carve out valleys over time. You see the erosion on the outside of the S-shaped bends. Sometimes there'll be a creek blowout that deposits large amount of debris and boulders. In 2006, a summer creek blowout actually stranded some boaters and they had to dynamite the debris to open up the river. In between paddling, hiking, and gazing at the landscape, we eat. And we eat well. I particularly like Taco Tuesday. Yes, even on the river, there is Taco Tuesday. We have been eating very well, and I'm pleased that at the end of the day, there's a cold beer or a glass of wine for those who choose. You're also allowed to bring some extra if you want, and they'll keep it cold for you. I never figured out how they did that. On one of our hikes to see more petroglyphs, we learned that they made these images using iron oxide, which gives the red tones that we see, mixing that with fat. This sure worked well, as they're super old and look like they're holding up really well. At the Indian Creek Put-In, you can chat with Diana Uwe, a sheep eater, who can tell you more about the petroglyphs and our people's history. I'm also going to put a link to a YouTube video from the U.S. Forest Service about this whole area and the sheep eaters. You'll find these on the show notes at the website, activetravieladventures.com. One of my favorite hikes was up to Vail Cave and Vail Falls. Of course, I'm going to put photos and videos on the website, but if you want to see nature as a cathedral, this is the place. Over the millennia, dribbles of water from the waterfall have carved out this massive half-clam shell of an opening in the mountainside, so you can walk under this incredible waterfall. It's worth the trip down the river just to see it, and I can see why it's one of the guide's special places. It feels like sacred ground. When you're resting, and indeed sometimes even from the boat, you can fly fish if you get your license and bring your rod. This is some of the best fly fishing and catch and release fishing in the country. A couple things you should know before you book. You can clean up in the river a bit, but basically you're not going to be fully clean for about 6 days. I liked using a ball cap under my paddle helmet better than my long-sleeved hat. I also recommend bringing some cotton gloves to protect your hands from the sun if you're sun sensitive like I am. Since you're going to be returning back to Boise, arrange for your non-rafting clothes to be left behind at the hotel, so all you need to do is bring a small duffel bag with your daily needs. I also think it's a good idea to bring a carabiner, one of those little things that open up and kind of hook around and secure something. That can help you secure your dry bag, the little small one that they lend you to bring on the boat with you. You don't need to, it just makes it a little easier to get in and out of it, I thought. The little small dry bag, again, that's going to carry your sunscreen, any extra day clothes, while your large dry bag that goes with the swampers holds all the rest of your gear. Another thing, if you're allergic to bees, make sure to bring EpiPens. One of the big nuisances that we did have is that yellow jackets kept trying to get into our drinks. In fact, one got in my beer and stung me on the lip. And fortunately, I'm not allergic, but I did look like Homer Simpson for the last couple of days with a huge protruding upper lip. Looked ridiculous. I am not putting a photo of that on the website. The last couple of days had some of the, I believe the word the guides used was spicy. Yes, the spiciest rapids of the run. I loved it. And we all by this time had our confidence up and we charged into them with abandon. It was a blast. A little ways down the river, we passed the former hideout of Earl Parrott, the hermit of Impassable Canyon. There are very few remnants of the old homesteads, but every once in a while we were able to check something out when we got off the raft just to stretch our legs a little bit. And like I said, they would always take us to see something historical or cool to look at. I forgot, I never told you why they call it Wilderness of No Return. The reason for it is this is such a raging river that when they would transport supplies down the river, it was just too difficult to get the boats back up river. So they just would dismantle them and use the lumber to build a house or do something else with the boat. But they never were able to get the boats back up to do repeat runs with that same individual boat. So it's not the fact that it's a scary river, although it is a very challenging river and it's a fun river. I mean, it's got tons of rapids and lots of that. In fact, when Lewis and Clark first encountered the Salmon River, they tried to go downstream and then they said, nah, this is not worth it. We're going to do something else. And so I believe they went around. I'm guessing they got there early spring during spicy season, which reminds me again to emphasize that if you go in the beginning of the season when the snow melt is coming down the mountains, you're going to have a much spicier ride than you will later in the season the way we did. Ours was fun and exciting and challenging, but I was never scared. I think I might have been a little scared had I gone in the spring. So just keep that in your mind so you know the right time to book the trip that suits your temperament and your comfort level. And I want to mention too, nobody ever got tossed from the raft. That was never an issue. Like I said, we had great guides. And the one time I was tossed from a raft, this was in New Zealand, it was actually kind of fun and one of my favorite memories. Anyhow, one of my earlier concerns before I even booked was, what was I going to do a whole week on the river? That sounded like a long time. Virtually all of my rafting experience was on half-day runs. Even on my 2-day rafting trip in Costa Rica, we were only on the raft about half a day. So I was worried that A, it would be too much for me, or B, I would get bored. I was never bored. And I was never thinking, oh, we got to get back on the raft again. I was never counting the days till I get it off the water. Every day was exciting, fun, gorgeous, and it was truly a trip of a lifetime. And I doubt I'm alone in thinking that. It seemed like everybody had a grand time. I suffer from insomnia most of the time, and I have for the last 10 years. Oddly, during this trip, I slept great the whole week. Was it the fresh air, the calming nature, exercising, being away from technology and my tenants, or a combination of all the above? All I know is I finally remembered, Oh my gosh, this is what a good night's sleep feels like. It was fabulous. And when I would wake up to relieve myself in the middle of the night, I was treated to a gemstone-filled sky. When you've got zero light pollution, like it is out on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, the night sky makes its own magic. And I think there's something like 300 rapids, and each time we entered one, we were all just as excited, and that feeling never faded throughout the week. In fact, we were more into them the more our confidence got, even when we got over some really challenging little falls or spicy-looking maneuvers that the gals would have to get our rafts through. By the end of the week, we were very quick with our response to paddle forward, paddle back, left forward, right back, get down. I must admit, I think we got pretty darn good at doing whatever the guides told us to do within the first second or two of the command. Most of the time, I preferred to be paddling, but on occasion, I'd ride in the big boat, so I could just sit back and just enjoy the scenery. I found it interesting that seamlessly, without a whole lot of discussion other than, oh, I feel like paddling, oh, I feel like riding in the boat, it always seemed to work itself out so people got to do what they wanted to do, whether it was being in front of the raft, which is it's definitely wetter and a little bit more excited because you are up front and personal with that drop or the rock that's coming up or whatever exciting thing we're about to encounter. And there were enough rafts that everybody got to paddle if they wanted to paddle or sit in the big boat if they wanted to. Everything always seemed to work out all by itself. I remember the names of some of the rapids, like Tappan and Haystack. Haystack has had a couple of side creek blowouts the last few years, which have actually changed the course of the river. We passed a batholith, a new word and a new concept for me. A batholith is a large mass of intrusive igneous rock formed from cooled magma deep in the Earth's crust. In order to be called a batholith, it has to be at least 100 kilometers or 40 square miles in size. And this one that we passed is the largest in North America. Cool, cool, cool. If you're a rock lover like me, you're going to love this trip. As we near the takeout where the Middle Fork meets with the main Salmon River, we get a little quiet. Everyone is trying to soak in the scenery and the moment one last time. This was the last river run of the season, and the guides are rather sad about that. We've had a tremendous ride. Up ahead, we see a road and our bus. And a bathroom. Yay! We change into dry gear before loading onto the bus for the 2-hour ride to Salmon. That night, we enjoy our farewell dinner and toast to our adventure and new friends. Some of the gals on this trip actually met on previous Adventure Women trips, and now they travel together on ongoing Adventure Women trips. It's easy to see why, as we all form tight bonds. This has been one fantastic trip, and I can't wait to explore other long-distance paddle trips. If you've been on one or can recommend one, please email me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. I hope you've enjoyed paddling the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in Idaho with me. I loved reliving my adventure with you and do appreciate you listening. I intend to keep this program ad-free as, personally, I like to listen to my podcasts without ads. It's like when I had my nursery business. I hated paying delivery charges, so I never charged my customers delivery fees. But deliveries do cost money, as does putting together this podcast and website. So if you are enjoying this program, one absolutely free way you can help support the program is to use my affiliate links whenever you buy travel insurance or sign up for Marcus's online adventure travel training program or any of my tour links. Again, at no additional cost to you, I might earn a small commission. Not every link is an affiliate link, but just a heads up that some of them are. But if they are affiliate links and I do earn a small commission, it does help defray some of the costs of keeping this program going. You can always visit my resources page at activetraveladventures.com/resources, plus many of the links that you'll find on my site. And remember, I only recommend companies that I know, like, and trust. I very much appreciate your support. Thank you so much. On our next program, we're going to exotic India with my new friend Karthika Gupta of Culturally Ours. She now lives in the U.S., but is from India. So we're going to get this inside scoop on India from a native. We talk about trekking in northern India in the Himalaya mountains. We also talk about over-tourism and why one of the most popular treks is now closed. She alleviates my fears about some of the scary things that I think about when I think about traveling to India. And generally, Karthika changes my mind now, so now I want to go to India after deciding against it after I went to Egypt last fall. You'll learn all about why on the next Active Travel Adventures program. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!